let's talk about Christian nationalism. When one thinks of Christian nationalism, we usually imagine some kind of image of reactionary, modern-day American politics, and so that is associated with the words Christian nationalism and people who want some kind of a theocracy. But the issue here is that this is not what a traditional theocracy was. It does not represent the ancient religion of Christianity, nor does it represent how Christian nations or empires were ruled throughout most of history. So on one end, we have the left, who is over-fanaticizing their enemies and claiming that anybody even slightly to the right of them is a Christian nationalist. Whereas these Christian nationalists on the far right are claiming anybody slightly to the left of them or outside of their realm of disagreement would have to be a leftist or a communist. But the reality is a lot more complex than you think. If we go back in time to the original Christian theocracies, we can see that the traditional method of government conduct was to actually have a multi-ethnic empire. And so if you look at the Holy Roman Empire, or you look at the Byzantine Empire, for example, was a mixture of Central Anatolians, Greeks, Slavs, Arabs, Jews, and a plethora of other groups. But the majority of the culture was Eastern Orthodox, led of course by the Byzantine Empire. The emperor of the Byzantine Empire, though not part of the clergy himself, was still a learned laity. He knew the basics of theology. He was very religious himself, and he built his empire and built his society on religious lines. Even the Codex of Justinian, which I mentioned in my short, was based primarily on the law of Moses found in the Torah of the Bible, not on secular laws that were reached via some philosophical conclusion that took place over hundreds or thousands of years of debate. No, this was a true religious environment, and this is how religious environments were upheld until the 1800s, and this is where the story takes a dark turn. In the 1800s, specifically into the mid-1800s, is where the idea of a traditional society is lost. Not only did the villager leave his ancient land of his ancestors for the factory, but also the secular governments overthrew the theocracies throughout all of Europe. And so you had the French Revolution, you had the Portuguese Revolution, the Italian Revolution, you had the Austrian revolutionaries, and especially with the Italians, they removed the papal states. So even though religion was not banned from daily life, religious rule was eliminated. So any ideology coming from the 1850s or later in the continent of Europe cannot be said to be actual Christian ideology, nor can it be said to be a proper theocracy. So what are we seeing today in the United States of America with this Christian nationalism? What we're seeing is an amalgamation of post-secular European ideologies. Even the word Democrat and Republican originally come from these secular ideologies. Republican is not just talking about the ancient pagan Roman Empire, but also what a Republican was in Europe only a couple of 100 years ago, 150 years to be precise. A Republican was one who fought against the theocracies to establish a secular government, a separation of the state and religious life. And so unlike in the Byzantine Empire, or even in the Russian Tsar, where there were reforms that led to a government that was not influenced that much by the clergy, religion was still a major part of life. And so in a secular environment, religion is no longer part of the government at all. It's not part of morality. It's not part of the upholding of society. Nothing. Not part of punitive justice. Religion is relegated to being something that is only a pastime for an individual, but is no longer the glue that holds a society together. And so this is the kind of domain, the kind of world that we see when we look at today's Christian nationalism. We see a post-World War I, post-World War II, post-secular Europe ideology of some kind of strange secular conservatism based very vaguely on, let's say, whole milk supremacy, but with no tangible link to an actual European past. So you see people fantasizing about some fake Disney version of European Christendom that either never existed or that they would never be a part of. It reminds me of how in the 2010s, like kind of in the 2015s, you had so many young men going to trad Catholicism, but they weren't actually learning the religion. They didn't know the theology. They were doing it for the aesthetics. They were doing it because they wanted to be super ultra conservative so that they could get rid of their enemies, the woke and the progressives of their nation. But none of this has anything to do with practicing the actual religion. And so even though religion tells us how to ordain a society, it is not the be-all, end-all. The be-all, end-all of Christianity is not to establish more seats for the GOP, Rather, it is to establish God's kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, as we see in the Lord's Prayer. And so this goes above and beyond any modern-day conservative ideas. But Christian nationalism, in my opinion, will fail. Not because of the idea of a theocracy is bad, but because these people don't know what a theocracy is, and in truth, they probably don't want one if they knew what it was. They don't want a theocracy. They still want a secular government, but they want it to be trad and conservative with some of the elements and aesthetics of Christianity. I don't think any of them would last in a theocracy, and I don't think they know how a theocracy operates, because nothing that we're seeing in the United States today has anything to do with traditional Christianity. And so again, I, myself, Jim, I am in favor of a theocratic government. I am in favor of religion being an institution that's part of governance, but not if we don't understand what the religion is, and not if we're still going to keep using these old, rehashed, secular ideologies from Europe, which have proven time and time again to be detrimental to the development of all people who adopt these kind of ideas. You know, if you take a look at all the societies in the world who have adopted the secular style of Europe, either the extremely hard secularism of communism, which was in the east of Europe, or the kind of lighter secularism of the West, you can see that it erodes traditional values, and in the places where traditional values are upheld, the American imperialism, which still exists to this day, Anglo-American imperialism, dictates that they should adopt these woke ideologies. And so you see that we have, on one hand, a colonialism, which is still secular, hates religion, says it's oppressive, but then they run around oppressing people and establishing their own morals. And yet these are the same people that are saying Christians cannot establish any morals in their countries. So one thing to remember is that conservatives keep asking, why isn't the left fair? The left did X, why can't we do Y? You shouldn't ask why. Nobody's going to just let you do a theocracy. You have to actually unite, band together, and if this is something that everybody wants, then you can establish it. The left is not going to allow you to establish a theocracy. That's not how the world works. But the point is that every power, whether secular, whether woke, whether conservative, but still irreligious, such as in China, I wouldn't call them woke, but I wouldn't call them religious either. Everyone is enforcing some form of morality on this world. And so it is up to the man who believes in God to enforce the morality of God, not to apologize for it, not to compromise for it, not to mix it and syncretize it with secular ideology that has nothing to do with the theocracy. So those are my opinions on Christian nationalism, why it's not going to work, why it does not work and it makes no sense, and what the future of some theocracy should look like. Thanks for watching.